Is your team ready to defend against the latest cyber threats? Validate human cyber defense readiness with Rangeforce. Sharpen your team's capabilities with a cloud-based platform that takes a real-world, continuous approach to cybersecurity skills development. Rangeforce empowers cyber defense readiness at scale, with hundreds of interactive modules, learning paths mapped to industry frameworks, skill assessments, and team-based defensive threat exercises. Visit securityweekly.com/Rangeforce to learn more. Customers want fast and frictionless digital experiences, yet also expect protection against breaches, privacy violations, and fraud. Drive engagement by optimizing security and convenience to attract and retain customers. Use the PingOne cloud platform to build, test, and optimize digital experiences. The no-code orchestration engine weaves together authentication, user management, and MFA, all of which can enhance security, drive engagement, and boost revenues. Visit securityweekly.com/ping identity to learn more. Mute button. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Sorry, I was chewing some ice there. Didn't want it to go on the mic, so I muted myself and forgot. All right, for our second interview today. Oh, there's the on-demand. Some good stuff up there. We've had some good ones this year. If you want to learn about crypto, all kinds of technical stuff. There's some good stuff there. For our second interview today, Evgeniy joins us today to talk about why SASE and SSE are even more important in 2022. If you don't know what SASE and SSE are, we're going to get into that. He has spent many years implementing various technologies and helping large enterprises build security programs with his many years at Ergovet Group. Sorry, I was looking for it. Blank for a moment there. And in 2020, he co-founded the Security Architecture podcast with Dmitry, a very unique spin on security podcast that focuses on the nuts and bolts of how enterprise security products work, their use cases, and what they do, interviewing a lot of vendors that sell these products. So a very interesting podcast series. Welcome to the show, Evgeniy.
Thank you. And I don't know what to do, Adrian, because I don't build any jet engine in my garage. So I don't even know what to say, what I'm good at, right now.
Yeah, I mean, how do you follow that up? What do you follow that with? I bake cookies.
But I know what I have twins. It's a different.
You have
problem.
twins. That's an accomplishment.
Yes. I think I break the rule of men cannot multitask, because the moment you have twins, you forget about what possible, not possible. You just do it.
Yeah. So I believe you had a personal announcement. There's a reason we didn't announce you, with your title at Ergovet Group. Do you want to get into that now or save it to the end?
Yes. No, I'll do it right now. So after 15 years in Ergovet Group, working with many, many great individuals, it's time to spread my wings. I left Ergovet around 3 weeks ago, starting on my own, continue building the podcast, start another podcast, and do vendor consulting. So very happy for the last 15 years and looking forward for the next and for the future.
Awesome. And so this podcast, for the Security Architecture podcast, you decided to start with SASE. Why did you pick SASE of all categories?
This kind of was interesting because I was in Israel literally 4 weeks before the pandemic started. And I was talking to David Sparks from a CISA show about my idea of the podcast, and I want to interview vendors. And I actually presented my way called Beyond Perimeter in Palo Alto Ignite conference in 2017. It was not even a name of SASE. So I got a sort of vision that people working from anywhere, and they probably need to be secure, doesn't matter where they're going. So the idea was there. I also spent a lot of time with firewalls, URL filtering, security web gateway solutions in my life. So I kind of said, okay, let's start with this. And the moment we decided we're going to go with SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, the pandemic started. And it makes so much sense because literally in 2-3 weeks, people needed to figure out how they take 10% of people connecting remotely to 100%. How do they still secure them? Do I actually tunnel all the traffic back to the environment? Do I do split tunneling? Do I just let them go to the internet without any security? So it was really, really like connected to the time frame, and it was made sense to understand, do I go Zscaler, Netscope, Palo Alto, IBOS, McAfee, ForcePoint, and gazillion other options in the industry. So I guess luck.
They don't. Yeah. I mean, it's serendipity. You jumped into the right thing at the right time. And I think people really needed it because SASE isn't really a product, right? SASE is like a collection of, it's almost like a checkbox thing. Like it could be any one of these 9 things or a combination of these 9 things, right?
I think it's more of a framework. At least Gartner called it a framework. Okay. And I agree with this because it's a collection of tools, as you say. And also the term itself started in 2018 in August. And this year in January, Gartner actually made a big change because they came up with SSE, Secure Service Edge. That the biggest difference here is there's no SD-WAN, no network component. But what was significant here, they aggregated the remote access ZTNA, CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker, Security Web Gateway under one umbrella. So it used to be as a framework, but now it's become a product because all these 9 different options were in a way interconnected.
Before we go much further, let's play a little game. Let's see between me, Katie, and Tyler how many components of SASE we can guess, or we can name off. I know. I'll start us off because I think I know a few off the top of my head. CASB.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. ZTNA.
Mm-hmm.
Secure Web Gateway.
Yes, this is the main 3, and there's there's main 4, and there's like a subcategories. And the last one, who wants to guess?
SD-WAN.
Yes, I need to get the traffic
or
somehow.
Possibly firewall as a service.
So this is a very good point because in a Gartner explanation, it's Secure Web Gateway. But I agree with you that firewall as a service is pretty much the same. It's just different way to manipulate the traffic in the cloud. So in my mind, Security Web Gateway and firewall as a service in the cloud, it's pretty much serve the same purpose. And we have many vendors like Palo, Forti, Checkpoint, Cisco that play in the game and claim they're in SASE space. So I agree they should be under one category as Security Web Gateway / firewall as a service.
And then there's SSE. So since we're defining them, we're talking about them, we might as well touch on SSE as well, right?
So SSE is the same, just drop the SD-WAN. So it's just the security component of SASE without the network. So we kind of don't care how the traffic get to the cloud part for inspection. We just assume it's there. It could be an agent, it could be over SD-WAN, it could be over any other protocol, maybe even a chain proxy.
Right. And I guess it makes sense to combine all these. I don't know. Some of them make a little less sense to me. Like maybe the CASB piece. I don't see every vendor using the full. Well, let me ask you. I mean, do you actually see?
Let's go to CASB for a second, okay? Because
okay.
I think CASB is the most confusing one. And I'll go very quickly in history. When CASB started around 7 years ago, there was a couple of ideas there. I will understand your URL categories, where you're going, and I find the basically shadow IT, where you're not supposed to go, where you're not supposed to share, without doing anything with it. Very quickly, all the network companies, Cisco, McAfee, Checkpoint, understood they can do it by themselves on their gateways, just acquire the companies like Sky High and many others, and just did it over there. So we had like shadow IT, then we can do it inline gateway, but then we realize, okay, but what if I connect it from outside? Can I do reverse proxy? Okay, reverse proxy. So now we have reverse proxy under CASB. But what if I go to Dropbox and I'm not doing anything and there's no way to route the traffic? Okay, let's do CASB over API. So indirect connectivity to Dropbox, OneDrive, to understand if you upload a malicious file, to understand if you share this file with everyone and not just Adrian, for example. So CASB is like a weird hybrid idea of many different technologies, because Secure Web Gateway is also under CASB in a way. This way, we now call it CASB over API, for example. And if you think about this, in reality, we don't have CASB vendors anymore. The last vendor that is by itself is probably Netscope, that doesn't claim they're CASB because it claims they're SASE. Every other native CASB vendor was acquired by someone else and become a part of the bigger solution.
Right. And my question was, do you see customers utilizing most of these components, or do they tend to lean on just one or two of them, or did they really use SASE as, the full framework to its fullest, or is it some kind of mix between?
Majority of the customers that I interacted and spoke are in the middle of the journey. It's almost like a cybersecurity, it's a journey, all the zero trust. They start somewhere. So they will start with the CASB over API. Shadow IT is the most popular one to understand what you do and how you do it. And they start blocking. I can sanction apps and unsanctioned apps. So I can start blocking unsanctioned applications. So we're going to be in the middle of the journey. The more advanced of the customers, the more mature, probably going to use like two of the pillars. I don't have many customers that I'm familiar that use everything. They're probably somewhere in the middle. And probably most of the smaller one will be in the beginning when they're using one pillar of the SASE framework or SSE framework.
And what's driving it in most cases? Is it the fact that they don't want to use a VPN for this stuff, or they lack control over the applications, or maybe the finer grain control? Like what are what's really driving companies to get into this? Is it the hype? The advertising?
There is a bit of a hype, but we all know that hype costs money. There's the idea of zero trust, journey to zero trust and compliance, and there's a lot of zero trust ideas in the SASE world, because a lot of the stuff there are based on you, based on user, based on where you're coming. Device posture check. You ask Anthony before, how do I know? How do I actually route the traffic of DNS? Very similar. I probably have a client that understands Evgeniy is Evgeniy, and Evgeniy is allowed to do X, Y, Z. So this part is important. Second part, people understand, customer understood, that Evgeniy is no longer going to be, or Adrian, in one space. We need to protect Evgeniy, doesn't matter where he goes. So we need to have a consistent security. And it may change how I route the traffic, but it's going to be there. Also, especially with pandemic, the outsourcing part became much bigger. So how do I control people that I outsource, how they connect to my environment? Do I give them access a lot over VPN, or I do ZTNA and I control where they can go and what they can do? The other factor, beside what's happening in cybersecurity, the rest of the world moved to SaaS. Like, think about this. Office 365, Salesforce, and so many different things are basically SaaS applications. So I need to figure out how do I control access to them as well, in a way that I know where you can go, what you can do, and potentially also report on it. Because there's a combination of stuff.
And at the risk of saying, creating another acronym, are there things missing from SASE? Are there things that should be built into it but aren't?
In my humble opinion, yes. If we think about the framework, we want to control who can do what. We want to control DLP, data leakage prevention, what kind of documents I can export. This is where CASB comes in, inline security web gateway comes in as well. And I think email security should be part of SSE as well. Because first of all, email security is one of the biggest factors for the bad guys to get in and send us links. All the email security vendors right now do some kind of URL whitelisting when they check the URL for threats and understand if it's a malicious URL. It's a part of security web gateway component. DLP is definitely integrated part of email gateway for outbound. Email gateway check for antivirus and malware. So the email gateway have a lot of components that are part of SASE already. And we also have quite a big trend and movement to do email security over API, not just security web email gateway like over MX record, but over API. nothing stops me to connect over API to Gmail, OneDrive, and kind of treat it as a CASB or Dropbox to check files, check URLs, and check what's in the email content.
And it's interesting. I think traditionally we've seen a separation between technologies that keep employees safe by controlling what they go out to, in this direction, versus talking about email security being integrated with this. That has always tended to be like the threat intelligence, firewalls, email gateways, stuff like that. The stuff that protects bad stuff from coming in. Has traditionally been separate. I'm trying to think of some examples where the two have been combined in a product, and I can't think of a whole lot.
Proofpoint. So Proofpoint going to be one example. Without promoting Proofpoint, I have no connection to them, but they are email security company that acquired a remote access product, acquired a SASE product. So effectively, right now, they're probably one of the few that come from email security and now have other offering in the SASE framework. There are several other vendors that have ability to scan emails, but they're not claiming they're huge email security, just part of the offerings they have as well. So they're kind of starting to play in the space.
Yeah, I forget about the acquisition sometimes. I still, when you say Proofpoint, I still think just of the email piece, because that's what I had experience with. All the acquisitions came later. So a different way of looking at it, are all these roll-ups, do they reduce the overhead on the people buying these products? Do they make it easier to consume and manage and use these products? Take Palo Alto has done a lot of roll-ups of things. I mean, sometimes it's still very much like integrating and deploying separate products. But in the case of SASE, if you can get that all down to a single console, is it making it easier on people? Are these roll-ups good for the customer?
I think they're definitely good for the customers. Now, the question is if the vendor actually finished the roll-up or they start advertise, we have capability within doing the roll-up. Let's come back to talk about DLP, for example. If I need to stop a license plate or a driving license from someone from Canada or US, do I really want to do a rule on email, endpoint, network, monitoring, and CASB, or I want to create it in one place and to roll to all my security controls? Same could be with scanning of files or scanning of archive files. So it's definitely much easier to do it in one place. Also, let's talk about troubleshooting. If I have the control over email, inline protection, potentially some endpoint, we don't really have many SASE vendors that have an endpoint solution. There's some technology partnerships there. But I now can understand the life of the traffic, the life of a packet, how they get in, what they did, and what happened with it, to help me understand how information potentially leaked from the company or how the information get into the company.
Right. And speaking of rolling things up, we've got some new categories that are kind of adjacent to SASE here, and maybe some other things like the enterprise browsers. We're going to talk about both Island and Talon both raised money this week or announced additional funding this week. And then we have all the DSPM vendors as well. But yeah, first the browsers. How do you see these enterprise browsers fitting into SASE? Is there overlap, some competition here, or?
Funny enough, you mentioned, because we actually season 4 of the podcast, we are featuring browser security. It's basically browser isolation and browser security. So both Talon and Island. Talon was released a couple of weeks ago. Island will be released probably next week or week after. And there's other great companies like Menlo Security, also of course Proofpoint, like Sky High, and many others that are part of this. I personally think they will get there. So let's talk about browser, enterprise browser. If you read on the website and you want to watch some of the episodes, they do DLP, they do URL filtering. Island announced they're going to do remote access. So they're already playing in these categories by providing some of the features. I don't really see them yet doing API-based security. It's probably going to be too big of a jump. But as part of the browser, they're going to able to provide you the entire functionality. Now, it's not silver bullet, as we know, because what if I use a different browser? So if I don't have an MDM solution, for example, to control a different browser, then I have this great tool, but I can go to a different browser and use something else. For a third-party contractor and outsourcing, I think it's a very easy tool for the company to use, because I hired Evgeniy, I hired Adrian. If Adrian doesn't use a specific browser like Town and Island, we cannot do our work. So we kind of found to another way of authentication, of proof who we are, what we have to do the work. And we're going to also have not just browsers, we're going to have extensions. I know there's a couple of stealth companies that basically going to give you an extension. You can install a new browser using already. They're going to give you a similar functionality.
Yeah, actually, one of the very first CASB products that I saw was Intermedia, the company that they're most famous for exchange hosting. But they actually made I think they acquired a company, and they called the product App ID, and they're actually sunsetting it this year. They're killing it off this year. But I believe it worked either through a browser plugin or an agent that you installed. And that was back in 2013.
And if you look on this, you mentioned new categories. We also see an interesting movement of remote access vendors. So all the ZTNA vendors that came out with a clientless or client-based way to connect realize if they want to play in SSE space, they will need to add. So Perimeter 81, company from Israel, Access, TwinGate, they're adding capabilities right now to be able not just do remote access, but also be able to do URL filtering and other things to compete in the space. That some of them are actually trying to do DNS security from your previous conversation. Like, oh, I don't have the entire URL filtering, but what if I control the DNS and I can do light version of URL filtering to be in a space?
Gotcha. So you mentioned DLP earlier as something that was kind of missing from the SASE space at the moment.
Not DLP, DLP is there. Email. DLP is there. Email.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because Netscope has had a DLP piece for a while. Microsoft has had it.
ForcePoint, BitGlass, Zscaler, iBoss,
Perimeter 81.
Yeah, all of, and interesting, some of the companies not just have DLP towards outside. If you connect over remote access, so let's say I'm a contractor again, and I want to grab a document that I found on your network, I may not be allowed because DLP will stop me because I'm not supposed to get this document.
Right. So where do you see DSPM fitting in? So DSPM being, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but we've seen a few companies here. Eureka is one, where it's basically kind of a 3-tier thing where they're going to do discovery, find the data, some kind of DLP, so they can do categorization, automatic categorization of the data. And I understand we're past regex at this point, and that, they will actually train models, like if you have some kind of data they're not familiar with, they can do custom model training, and then actual enforcement, which all sounds like that's a lot to bite off. That's a lot to attempt. And some of them, I think, are just doing it in the cloud. Some of them do it on-prem as well. What do you think of this whole space, and how does it fit in with everything else we've been talking about?
I think Liat doing an amazing job in a space. I think she's one of the first ones that started the idea. I call it personally CSPM, Cloud Security Post Manager, but again, they're more on the database side. And we had product in the past that will do discovery. When GPDR started, we all understood we need to do discovery, but they are much more focused and much more like a scalpel to find not just data, but more specifically find data in the cloud. And cloud, I'm talking about Azure, GCP, and AWS. We, in a way, maybe can roll them under CASB on API security because they have to use API. When API security, I'm not trying to talk about Salt, No Name, and Neosec. with a different API security.
You use the API to get to the resources, to get to the data and inspect them. Now, I will mention the ones that we've talked about so far, you actually run, they give you an appliance and you run it in EC2 or something like that. They have an actual box.
Yes, I understand from where it's coming, because I seem to be coming here to compliance. If I have a very sophisticated data, I don't want this data to leave my company or leave my cloud. I prefer to put an appliance on-prem in a cloud, and then the data will stay there. This way, there is no way that you will be breached as a vendor and my data will be exposed to somebody else. I'm guessing this is where it's coming. Or I don't need to give you access to my passwords, to my API keys, that, again, I don't know how to control them and when I'm going to leave them. And this was interesting conversation with some of the vendors and the banks in the CASB space or CSPM space. Majority of the banks didn't want to expose their credentials to outside of the cloud because they didn't know how the CSPM vendors will treat them. And they prefer to have an on-prem inside the cloud appliance to do the job without exposing it outside.
Right.
So from my perspective, where I sit in the market, I hear a lot about CSPM, and there seems to be a lot of traction, a lot of adoption. Those companies are growing, enterprises are implementing it, and SASE has been a concept for at least as long, but it's not being as readily adopted. Why do you think that is?
SASE not adopted, or CSPM?
SASE isn't as mainstream yet, I don't think, as CSPM.
Interesting, because it depends on the customers. Even so, a lot of customers have data in the cloud. I don't really see very big number of customers have a mature CSPM framework. And in SASE, I see people using something. Majority of the customers have some kind of security web gateway, or cloud or on-prem. Maybe on-prem not count.
Right, but does having a component constitute SASE, or is it, like we talked about before, having the collection of tools?
I think it just takes time. It's not something that you just implement in 3 weeks. It will probably take you quite a lot of time, and there is no point to buy everything, because you're not going to have just time to do everything. So you have to finish one of the pillars and then move to the other pillars. Majority of the people I'm talking are in a process to do at least one of the pillar. So we're probably going to hear more customers end of the year that they kind of, we're using secure web gateway in the cloud, using ZTNA and some kind of part of CASB as well.
All right. As we wrap up here, Evgeniy, where can people find the podcast? And again, mention what you're getting into in the latest season.
So the podcast called Security Architecture Podcast. The URL is security-architecture.org. You can find me, Evgeniy Kharam, at LinkedIn, and find me through there as well. The latest season right now is we covering browser security and browser isolation. So it's in a way, potential part of SASE depending on the company. We're going to be around 6 to 8 vendors right now. We recorded most of them already, and I'm going to record a few soon. So quite interesting and intriguing how it's all tied together.
Yeah, nice. That's very different from our experience, like recording everything beforehand and then, releasing it Netflix style, right?
Funny you mentioned Dimitri, my co-founder. He's like, my dream is that Netflix will buy the show. He's like, okay, we'll see.
Yeah, that might be a dream. I don't see them buying security podcasts, at least not right now. Maybe Spotify.
Spotify, yeah, we are there as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And you do have you've got a couple of webcasts here in the show notes. You want to talk about that real quick?
Yes. So I presented about SASE 101 in Bright Talk to explain to people what does it mean, SASE/SSE. And I also did a presentation about browser isolation/security to explain the concept, why it's important, and who are the players. It's all available on Bright Talk if people want to join and learn and understand and how to start the journey. And I'm also more than welcome if people want to ask questions on LinkedIn. I'm available as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us today on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to be here.
All right. We'll be back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.